The great hall on Nexus Prime was quiet, too quiet for Jinha's liking. He stood at the speaker's platform, looking out at thousands of alien faces. Some had too many eyes. Others had no eyes at all. But they all looked at him the same way, like he was a child who had spoken out of turn. Jinha was young for a human leader, only 35 years old. The other species in the Galactic Council were hundreds, sometimes thousands of years old. They thought this made them wise. Jinha thought it made them lazy. The Treaty of Stellar Boundaries must change, Jinha said into the microphone. His voice carried across the massive room. Humans have been loyal to this council for 200 years. We have followed every rule. We have stayed in our corner of space like good children. But we are not children anymore. A sound like angry wasps filled the hall. That was how the Theknari showed they were upset. The Vorthok made clicking sounds with their sharp teeth. The blob-like Mortali changed color from blue to angry red. The human speaks out of place, said Councillor Zethkara, a tall gray creature with 4 arms. Earth was given the gift of council membership. This should be enough. Jinha felt his hands shake, but not from fear, from anger. A gift? He said. We earned our place here. Human ships helped win the Outer Rim War. Human doctors saved millions during the Red Plague. Human engineers built half the space stations you use today. We are not pets waiting for treats. The hall erupted in noise. Some creatures roared. Others made sounds like breaking glass. The ancient AI that ran the council chambers had to use its loudest voice to call for order. Silence, the AI boomed. The human representative will finish his statement. Jinha looked around the room. He saw fear in some faces, anger in others. But mostly, he saw surprise. No young species had ever talked to the council this way before. The hegemony accords say that older species get to make the rules, Jinha continued. They say that wisdom comes with age, but I have seen your wisdom. You have had peace for 1,000 years, yes, but it is the peace of a grave. Nothing grows, nothing changes, nothing gets better. He pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Holographic images appeared above the crowd. Pictures of human colonies, cities built inside asteroids, farms growing food in empty space, humans living in places that should have killed them. This is what humans do when you give us a challenge, Jinha said. We adapt, we grow, we find a way. Your species stopped growing long ago. You call it wisdom, I call it giving up. The Vorthak representative, a creature that looked like a walking skeleton covered in metal, stood up. Its voice sounded like grinding stone. The young human shows great disrespect. Perhaps Earth needs to be reminded of its place. Jinha smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Is that a threat, Counselor? It is a fact, the Vorthak replied. Young species who forget their place often have accidents. The room went completely silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Vorthak were famous across the galaxy for making problems disappear quietly. Jinha nodded slowly. I understand. But let me tell you something about humans, Counselor. We remember everything, every kindness, every insult, every threat. He looked directly at the Vorthak with his bright brown eyes. And we never ever forget. With that, Jinha gathered his papers and walked out of the council chambers. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Behind him, thousands of aliens sat in shock. No one had ever walked out of a council session before. It was unthinkable. 3 days later, Jinha was dead. The poison was perfect. Quantum-based, invisible to most medical scanners. It was supposed to stop his heart in his sleep, making it look like natural causes. The Vorthak had used it dozens of times before on troublesome leaders from young species. But human bodies were different. They processed toxins in unexpected ways. Instead of dying quickly, Jinha lingered. For 17 long hours he lay in his bed aboard the diplomatic ship New Sol, feeling the poison burn through his system. His friend Ha-Rin found him first. She was his chief military advisor, but more than that, she was like a sister to him. They had grown up in the same poor district of Sol. They had joined the space service together. They had dreamed together of the day when humans would stand as equals among the stars. "Ha-Rin," Jinha whispered when she entered his room. His skin was gray and his hands shook terribly. They poisoned me." "I know," she said, kneeling beside his bed. Her voice was steady, but tears ran down her face. "The doctors found traces, Vorthak quantum poison. Medical says you have maybe an hour." Jinha tried to sit up, but the effort made him gasp in pain. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "This was not just about me. This was a message. They wanted to show all the young species what happens when you challenge the old order. The medics are trying everything," Ha-Rin said. "Maybe, no." Jinha's voice was weak but firm. "I am dying, but my death does not have to be meaningless." He reached for her hand with fingers that barely worked. "You know about Protocol 7. Ha-Rin's eyes went wide. Protocol 7 was a secret that only 5 humans knew. It was their insurance policy, their final option if the galaxy ever tried to destroy them. Jinha, no. That would mean war. "They started this war when they put poison in my water," Jinha said. "I wanted peace. I wanted to change things slowly, carefully, but they chose violence." His breathing was getting worse. "Promise me, Ha-Rin. Promise me you will show them what humans really are." Ha-Rin was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I promise." Jinha smiled one last time. "Good. Get me a recording device. If I am going to die, the galaxy needs to hear my last words." The message Jinha recorded went out on every human frequency, to every colony, every ship, every settlement scattered across space. His dying words were simple, but they changed everything. "My fellow humans, they have killed me because I dared to say we deserved better, because I refused to bow to those who mistake age for wisdom. They think my death will make you afraid. They are wrong. Show them what we really are. Show them that humanity does not kneel." The message ended with Jinha's final breath. Back on Earth, Ha-Rin stood before the Emergency Human Council. The most powerful humans in space were gathered in the secret chamber beneath the old United Nations building. Military commanders, colony governors, intelligence chiefs, scientists, and engineers. All of them were angry. All of them were ready. They wanted to send a message, Ha-Rin said, her voice cold as space. "Let us send one back." She looked around the room at faces hard with determination. "I call for a vote. All in favor of activating Protocol 7? Every hand in the room went up. "Motion carries," Ha-Rin said. "Wake up the sleeping fleet. Contact the hidden colonies. Tell them Jinha is dead and the time for hiding is over." She paused, thinking of her friend's last words. "It is time to show the galaxy what humans really are." Outside, Earth looked the same as always. Blue and green and peaceful, but in the darkness between the stars, ancient engines were starting to hum. Ships that had waited for decades in the cold began to wake up. And humanity prepared to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The fire had been lit. Now it was time to burn. 6 months had passed since Jinha's death, and the galaxy had grown comfortable with silence. On Nexus Prime, Counselor Zethkara looked at the empty chair where Earth's representative used to sit. The human section of the Great Hall had been cleaned and repurposed. New species were already asking if they could take humanity's place. "The humans have learned their lesson," Zethkara told the other council members. "They know better than to challenge us now. Perhaps we should send them a new treaty, something to keep them busy and grateful." The Vorthak counselor made his grinding laugh. "Young species are all the same. Show them strength once and they remember their place forever. The humans are probably hiding in their little corner of space, too scared to come out." But the humans were not hiding. They were preparing. In the cold darkness beyond Pluto, where no alien scout had ever thought to look, Commander Quan stood on the bridge of a ship that should not have existed. The indomitable will was massive, bigger than any human vessel the galaxy had ever seen. But it was not alone. Around it floated dozens of other ships. Some looked like normal human designs, but bigger and meaner. Others looked like nothing anyone had seen before. Strange shapes that seemed to bend light around them, making them hard to see even when you knew they were there. Quan was old for a human soldier. 65 years of hard living had left scars on his face and gray in his hair, but his eyes were sharp and angry. He had been waiting 30 years for this day. "Report," he said to his communications officer. "All ships are responding, sir," the young woman replied. "The Deep Space Fleet is fully operational. Hidden colonies are coming online. The asteroid bases are powered up and ready." Quan nodded. "And the other fleets?" "Fleet 2 is holding position near Alpha Centauri. Fleet 3 is in the Vega system. Fleet 4 is—" She paused, checking her screens. "Fleet 4 says they're everywhere and nowhere, sir. You know how the stealth division likes to talk." Quan almost smiled. Almost. But Jinha was dead, and there would be time for smiles later. "What about our friends?" he asked. The officer's face lit up. "Sir, we're getting responses from 47 different systems. Turns out a lot of species don't like the Council as much as they pretend to. For decades, while the galaxy thought humans were content with their small role, they had been building, not just ships and weapons, but alliances. Quiet friendships with species the Council ignored or bullied. Trade partnerships that looked innocent but were really intelligence networks. Humans had a gift for making friends with the galaxy's underdogs. On the bridge's main screen, a face appeared. It was Harin calling from Earth's secret command center. She looked tired but determined. "How are we looking, Quan?" she asked. "Better than good," Quan replied. "The kids did great work while we were pretending to play nice with the Council. We've got ships they've never seen, weapons they've never imagined, and soldiers they're not ready for." "What about numbers?" Quan looked at his tactical display. Red dots showed human forces. There were a lot of red dots. "Harin, remember when we told the Council we had 20 ships for system defense?" "Yes." "We have over 1,000 combat vessels, plus support ships, supply lines, and mobile bases. Oh, and the mining ships." Harin raised an eyebrow. "Mining ships?" "Rex's idea," Quan said. "Turns out if you build a ship to tear apart asteroids, it can tear apart other things too. Big things. Heavily armored things." On another part of the ship, Rex was explaining this exact concept to a group of confused-looking officers. Rex had been a deep space miner for 20 years before he joined the secret fleet program. He was broad-shouldered and tough, with hands that could crush rocks and a mind that could solve impossible problems. "See, the thing about mining equipment," Rex was saying, pointing to a holographic display, "is that it's designed to work in the worst conditions possible. Radiation storms, gravity wells, asteroid fields that would chew up a normal ship." One of the officers, a young man from the Mars colonies, raised his hand. "But sir, how does that help us fight the Council fleets?" Rex grinned. It was not a nice grin. "Son, what do you think happens when you point a gravity drill at an enemy ship instead of an asteroid?" The officer's face went pale as he understood. "The Council thinks they know about human technology because they've seen our merchant ships and diplomatic vessels." Rex continued. "They've never seen what humans build when we're trying to survive in places that want to kill us. They're about to get an education." Back on the command bridge, Quan was reviewing reports from across human space. What he read made him proud and sad at the same time. Humans had been busy. In the asteroid belt, they had built entire cities inside rocks, powered by fusion reactors and protected by shields the Council had never seen. In the outer system, they had built ships that could travel between dimensions, making them almost impossible to track or hit. Some humans had changed themselves, genetic modifications that let them breathe in space for short periods, cybernetic enhancements that made them faster and stronger, neural implants that let them control multiple systems at once. These were not the soft diplomats the Council knew. These were humans who had adapted to survive in the harshest places in space. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're getting a message from Jake Morrison." Quan's expression hardened. Jake Morrison ran human intelligence operations, the spy networks that had been gathering information on the Council for decades. If Jake was calling, it meant he had something important. Jake's face appeared on the screen. He looked like a normal human businessman, average height, friendly smile, the kind of person you would forget 5 minutes after meeting him. This was perfect for a spy. "Quan, we've got a problem," Jake said without introduction. "The Council is planning something big. They're calling it Final Education, a plan to make sure no young species ever challenges them again." "What kind of plan?" Quan asked. "The nasty kind. They want to destroy 3 human colonies as an example. Show the galaxy what happens when you don't know your place. The attack comes in 1 week." Quan felt cold anger fill his chest. It was one thing to kill a diplomat with poison. It was another thing entirely to murder entire colonies full of families. "Which colonies?" he asked. "New Busan Haven and the research station at Kepler 442. About 2 million people total." Quan closed his eyes for a moment. His daughter lived on New Busan with his grandchildren. His brother worked at the Kepler research station. When he opened his eyes, they were hard as diamond. "Jake, how long do we have?" 6 days before their fleets move." Quan looked around his bridge, at the officers who had trained in secret for years, at the screens showing a human fleet the galaxy had never imagined, at the tactical displays showing human colonies spread across dozens of star systems. "Then we don't wait," he said. "Hey Rin, are you listening?" Her face appeared on the screen, again. "I'm here. The Council wants to kill 2 million humans to make a point," Quan said. "I think it's time we made a point of our own. How do you feel about moving up our schedule?" Harin was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Do it. Show them what happens when you threaten human families." Quan turned to his crew. "All ships, this is Commander Quan. Operation Payback is now active. Repeat, Operation Payback is now active. They wanted to teach the galaxy about consequences. Let's give them a lesson they'll never forget." Across human space, ships that had hidden in darkness for decades began to move. Engines that had waited patiently roared to life. Weapons that had been built in secret powered up for the first time. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been holding back for 200 years. Not because they were weak, but because they were patient. That patience had just run out. In the deep cold of space, the human fleet began its journey toward the first target, the Vorthak homeworld of Kethmoran, where the poison that killed Jinha had been made. They were going to deliver a message, written in fire and steel and the fury of a species that refused to kneel. The sleeping giants were awake, and they were very, very angry. The Vorthak homeworld of Kethmoran had never fallen, not in 3,000 years of war and conquest. The planet's orbital shields had turned back the greatest fleets in galactic history. Even the ancient builders had failed to crack its defenses. General Vexthara stood in the command center of the main orbital platform, looking down at his world with pride. Kethmoran was beautiful in a deadly way. Red seas under a purple sky, with cities that looked like great metal bones rising from the ground. "The human colonies will burn in 2 days," he told his staff officers. "Then the galaxy will remember why young species should stay quiet." His communications officer, a younger Vorthak with silver metal grafted to his skull, looked up from his console. "General, we have strange readings on the outer sensors." "What kind of readings?" "I'm not sure, sir. The computers say there's nothing there, but—" The officer paused, confused. "The gravity sensors show mass, but the visual scanners show empty space." General Vexithara laughed, a sound like grinding bones. "Your equipment is broken. There is nothing in this system except our own ships. The humans are too cowardly to come here." He was wrong. 50,000 kilometers above Kethmoran, the human fleet hung in space like ghosts. Their ships were there, but not there, existing in a state between dimensions that made them invisible to normal sensors. On the bridge of the indomitable will, Commander Quan watched the Vorthak orbital platforms through eyes that had seen too much war. The platforms were huge, each one the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could destroy planets. "Rex, are your miners ready?" he asked. Rex's voice came through the communication system from his ship, the Deep Digger. "More than ready, Quan. My boys have been dreaming about this for years." "Jake, what about the psychological warfare package?" Jake Morrison's voice was calm and professional. "All set. The broadcast will go out on every frequency the moment we decloak. Every species in the galaxy will hear what we have to say." Quan nodded. "Rin, Earth is ready?" Her image appeared on his screen. She was in the secret command bunker under Geneva, surrounded by tactical displays showing human forces across the galaxy. "Earth is ready. All colonies are ready. The Alliance fleets are in position. It's time, Quan." Quan looked around his bridge one last time, at the young officers who had trained their whole lives for this moment, at the veterans who remembered what the galaxy had been like before humans found their voice. "All ships," he said into his communication system. "This is Commander Quan. Today we teach the galaxy a lesson that has been 300 years in the making. Today we show them that humanity does not forgive. We do not forget, and we do not kneel." He paused, thinking of Jinha's last words. "Decloak. Begin Operation Payback." The human fleet appeared around Kethmoran like magic. One moment, the Vorthak sensors showed empty space. The next moment, they showed over 200 human ships in perfect battle formation. But these were not the small, human vessels the galaxy knew about. These were ships built in secret, designed by engineers who had studied every weakness in Vorthak technology for decades. The largest ships looked like giant hammers made of black metal. These were Rex's mining vessels, converted for war. The smaller ones moved like hunting cats, sleek and fast. Between them flew things that barely looked like ships at all, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. On the Vorthak command platform, alarms screamed. "Shields up!" General Vexithera roared. "All weapons, fire at will!" The orbital shields of Kethmoran came online. Energy barriers that had protected the planet for millennia blazed to life, creating a dome of pure force around the world. The Vorthak weapons fired. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, gravity bombs that crushed space itself, death rays that unmade matter at the atomic level. All of them missed. The human ships moved like they were dancing. They slipped between the weapon beams, phased through solid barriers, and did things that violated everything the Vorthak knew about physics. "Impossible," General Vexthara whispered. "How are they doing this?" His answer came when Rex's mining ships opened fire. The weapons they used were not designed for war. They were designed to break apart asteroids and tear useful metals from dead planets. Gravity drills that could twist space. Molecular saws that could cut through anything. Fusion torches that burned hotter than stars. When these tools hit the Vorthak shields, something unexpected happened. The shields didn't break. They didn't overload. They simply stopped existing. "What?" General Vexithara stared at his displays in shock. "Where are the shields?" "Gone, sir," his officer replied, his voice shaking. "The human weapons, they didn't destroy the shield generators. They erased them, like they were never built." Before the general could respond, every communication system on Kethmoran activated at once. Every screen, every radio, every emergency broadcast system. Jake Morrison's face appeared everywhere, speaking in perfect Vorthak language. "People of Kethmoran," Jake said, his voice calm and friendly. "We are humanity. Your leaders poisoned our Prime Minister Jinha because he dared to ask for equality. Your military is planning to destroy 3 of our colonies to teach the galaxy a lesson about challenging the old order." The image changed to show recordings from the secret council meetings. The Vorthak leadership planning Jinha's murder. The final education plan to destroy human colonies. The centuries of quiet assassinations that had kept young species in their place. "We are not here for conquest," Jake continued. "We are here for justice. Your military will surrender now, or we will make them surrender. Your choice." General Vexathara snarled and opened his own communication channel. You dare threaten us? We are Vorthak. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Jake smiled. It was not a nice smile. Yes, we know. We also know how you did it. Poison, assassination, terror. You have forgotten how to fight a real war against an enemy that fights back. As if to prove his point, the human fleet moved closer to Kethmoran. Their ships passed through the planet's atmosphere like it wasn't there, taking positions directly above every major military installation. Last chance, Jake said. Surrender now and your soldiers live. Your cities remain standing, your families go home safe. Refuse and we will show you what happens when humans get creative. General Vexathara looked at his tactical displays. His orbital platforms were defenseless without shields. His ground forces were good fighters, but they had never faced an enemy that could appear anywhere, anytime. His space fleet was outnumbered 5-1 by ships that moved like ghosts. But he was Vorthak. Pride was more important than wisdom. Never, he growled. We do not surrender to children. Jake nodded sadly. I was hoping you would say that. Rex, show them what human creativity looks like. What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for centuries. The human mining ships didn't attack the Vorthak military installations. They attacked the weapons themselves. Gravity drills reached down from orbit and plucked tanks from the ground like flowers. Molecular saws cut gun barrels into tiny pieces. Fusion torches melted armor into abstract art. In 15 minutes, the entire Vorthak military was disarmed. Not destroyed, disarmed. Their weapons were gone, but their soldiers were untouched. The orbital platforms suffered the same fate. Human ships phased through their hulls like ghosts, and engineering teams appeared inside the command centers. The Vorthak defenders found themselves facing humans in powered armor that let them breathe vacuum and survive plasma fire. But the humans didn't kill them. They stunned them, tied them up, and left them sitting in their own command chairs with little signs that read, "Prisoner of War," in perfect Vorthak script. General Vexathara found himself tied to his command chair, watching human soldiers work, with impossible efficiency. They moved like they had trained for this exact moment their entire lives. A human woman approached him. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and eyes like steel. Her armor was different from the others, sleeker, more advanced. "General," she said in accented but clear Vorthak. "My name is Captain Song. I'm here to accept your surrender." "I will never surrender to humans," the general snarled. Captain Song looked around the command center, at the Vorthak soldiers tied to chairs, at the control systems that had been carefully shut down rather than destroyed, at the planet below, where human ships hovered over every military base, all weapons carefully removed but all soldiers alive. "General," she said quietly, "you already have." Across the galaxy, the same scene played out on 3 more council worlds. The crystal cities of the Teknari found their sonic weapons turned into musical instruments. The gas giant platforms of the Mortali discovered that humans could fight in their crushing atmospheres better than they could. The time-dilated fortresses of the Ixendai were defeated by humans who moved through dimensions time couldn't touch. Each victory was broadcast across all frequencies. Each battle showed the same thing. Humanity didn't need to destroy to win. They were better than that. But the real message came at the end of each broadcast, when Jake Morrison appeared again with documents and recordings from the defeated worlds, financial records showing how the Council had kept young species poor, communication logs revealing centuries of secret assassinations, meeting transcripts where Council members talked about younger races like they were animals to be managed. "For 3,000 years, Jake said to the galaxy, you have been ruled by beings who see you as children, who kill your leaders when they ask for basic rights, who keep you weak so they can stay strong." His image was replaced by a picture of Jinha giving his final speech to the Council. "Our friend died because he believed that wisdom comes from growth, not age, because he thought the galaxy could do better. Today, we prove he was right." The final image was simple text, written in 100 different languages. "The old galaxy is dead. The new one begins now. Choose your side carefully. On Kethamaran, General Vexathara watched his world surrender with growing horror. Not horror at defeat, horror at understanding. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had won the war before it started. They had turned his people's weapons into art. They had captured his soldiers without killing them. They had broadcast his government's crimes to the entire galaxy. "Why?" he asked Captain Song. "Why didn't you just destroy us?" She looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Because," she said, "we're better than you." The fire was spreading, and the galaxy would never be the same. Nexus Prime had stood for 5,000 years. The great space station was the size of a small planet, built by 12 different species working together. It was the heart of galactic civilization, the symbol of council power, the one place in the galaxy that had never been conquered. Today, that was about to change. Counselor Zethkara stood in the emergency session chamber, looking at reports that made no sense. In 1 week, humanity had defeated 4 major council military powers. Not just defeated, humiliated. The Vorthak, who had conquered 1,000 worlds, surrendered without killing a single human. The Thekanari, who had never lost a battle in 2,000 years, had their entire fleet converted into a traveling music show. "This is impossible," Zethkara said to the assembled council. "Humans are a Class 7 species. They should not have technology this advanced. They should not have fleets this large. They should not be able to do this." This was the holographic display showing human forces across the galaxy. Red dots marking human ships appeared in dozens of star systems. Some were protecting the colonies the council had planned to destroy. Others surrounded council worlds, making no aggressive moves but clearly ready to fight. The scariest part was how many red dots there were, thousands of them. "Where did they get all these ships?" asked Counselor Merthak of the Ixindai. His time-dilated voice sounded slow and confused. "They've been building them for decades," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see a human woman walking into the chamber. She wore simple clothes, a black business suit that looked normal except for the force field generator on her belt. Her name was Ha-Rin, and she should not have been able to get anywhere near this room. "How did you get past our security?" Zethkara demanded. Ha-Rin smiled. "The same way our fleets got past your sensors. You never really understood what humans are capable of." She walked to the center of the room like she owned it. "My name is Ha-Rin. I was Jinha's friend and advisor. I'm here to accept your surrender." The council chamber erupted in angry sounds. Roars, clicks, whistles, and electronic screeches filled the air. Every species had their own way of showing outrage, but the message was clear. How dare this human walk into their sacred chamber and demand they surrender? "You are one person," Zethkara said when the noise died down. "We are the rulers of the galaxy. Nexus Prime has defenses that could destroy entire solar systems." "Yes," Ha-Rin agreed. "You have very impressive defenses. Would you like to see them?" She pressed a button on a small device. Every screen in the chamber activated, showing the space around Nexus Prime. What they saw made several council members make choking sounds. The station's great defense platforms were still there, hundreds of them, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But sitting next to each platform was a human ship. Not attacking, not threatening, just sitting there, close enough to touch. "How long have they been there?" Zethkara whispered. 3 days, Ha-Rin said casually. "Your sensors never saw them arrive. Your defense systems never fired a shot. Your guards never raised an alarm." She looked around the room at faces full of shock and growing fear. "Would you like to know why?" Without waiting for an answer, she continued. "Because we've been studying you for 200 years. Every weapon you use, every tactic you employ, every weakness you try to hide. Did you think we were just sitting in our corner of space doing nothing?" The truth was worse than they had imagined. Humanity hadn't been hiding. They had been learning. Every diplomatic mission had been a spy operation. Every trade agreement had been intelligence gathering. Every cultural exchange had been preparation for this moment. "Impossible," said Counselor Rektar of the Mortali, his gas bag body changing, color rapidly with emotion. We have the greatest military minds in the galaxy, the best technology, the most experienced soldiers. Harin nodded politely. You do have experience. 3,000 years of it. Fighting the same enemies, using the same tactics, thinking the same thoughts. She paused. We have something better. We have imagination. To prove her point, she activated another hologram. This one showed the human assault on the Mortali gas giant colonies just 2 days ago. The Mortali watched in horror as human soldiers in powered armor swam through crushing atmospheres like fish through water, moving faster and more gracefully than creatures who had evolved there. Your people are gas breathers, Harin explained. You assumed no solid-form species could fight in your environment. You were wrong. Our soldiers trained for 5 years in gas giant simulators. They know your atmosphere better than you do. Another hologram showed human ships phasing through solid Tecnari crystal barriers. Your people think in terms of harmonic frequencies. You assume no one could match your crystal technology. You were wrong. We learned to sing your songs better than you do. A third hologram showed human engineers working inside Ixendai time-dilated facilities, moving at normal speed while everything around them crawled. Your people manipulate time itself. You assume no one could match your temporal technology. You were wrong. We learned to step outside time entirely. The pattern was clear. For every advantage the Council thought they had, humanity had found a way to do it better. Rex's voice came through the chamber's speakers, broadcast from his ship outside the station. The problem with being old, he said in his deep miner's voice, is that you forget how to learn new things. You get comfortable. You stop trying to improve. You think your way is the only way. Jake Morrison's voice joined him. We studied every species in the Council, not just your technology but your psychology, your fears, your blind spots, the things you're too proud to admit you don't understand. Finally, Commander Kwan's voice filled the chamber. You ruled through fear for 3,000 years. Time to remember what being afraid feels like. The screens changed again. Now they showed what was happening across the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, populations were rising up against their Council-backed governments. The broadcasts of Council crimes had spread everywhere. Species that had been quietly oppressed for millennia were suddenly demanding answers. The Zelkarian Republic has declared independence, Harin said, reading from her device. The Korvash colonies are no longer recognizing Council authority. The Ythmoran Trade Federation is demanding democratic reforms. She looked up at the stunned Council members. Should I go on? I have about 40 more updates. Zethkara felt something he had not experienced in centuries. True, deep fear. Not fear of death. That was simple. Fear that everything he believed about the natural order of the galaxy was wrong. What do you want? He asked quietly. Justice, Harin said simply. Jinha asked for equality. You killed him for it. Now you get to see what happens when humans stop asking nicely. The chamber shook slightly. Through the great windows they could see human ships moving closer to Nexus Prime, but they weren't attacking. They were positioning themselves around the station like a cage. You have a choice, Harin continued. Surrender now, and we'll talk about building a new galaxy where age doesn't determine wisdom, where every species gets a fair voice, where leaders who murdered diplomats face justice. And if we refuse? Zethkara asked, though he already knew the answer. Harin's expression didn't change. Then we'll show you exactly how creative humans can get when they're really trying. As if summoned by her words, the lights in the chamber dimmed for a moment. When they came back on, human soldiers were standing behind every council member. They had appeared like ghosts, moving through walls that should have been impenetrable. The soldiers didn't point weapons at anyone. They just stood there calm and professional, their armor humming quietly with power. Each one carried equipment that looked both familiar and alien, recognizable shapes twisted into new forms by human engineering. 7 minutes and 34 seconds, Harin said, checking a timer on her wrist. That's how long it took us to take control of Nexus Prime's primary systems. Your defense platforms, your life support, your artificial gravity, your communication arrays. All of it. She walked to the great window overlooking the station's central hub. Outside, human ships moved with perfect coordination, their formation both beautiful and terrifying. For 3,000 years, you told younger species that they needed to earn their place through service and patience, she said. You told them that wisdom came with age, that the galaxy worked best when the old ruled the young. She turned, back to face the council, her eyes hard as diamonds. Today we prove that evolution never stops, that adaptation beats experience, that the future belongs to those brave enough to build it, not those too comfortable to change. The chamber was completely silent except for the quiet humming of human technology. So, Harin said, who wants to talk about surrender? Outside the great windows, the lights of human ships stretched as far as the eye could see, an entire fleet that had appeared from nowhere, commanded by a species the Council had dismissed as harmless children. The galaxy's rulers sat in their chairs, prisoners in their own capital, and finally understood what it meant to be afraid. The age of the Council was over. The age of humanity had begun. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. The great chamber on Nexus Prime looked very different now. Where once thousands of alien representatives had sat in rigid hierarchy, now millions of beings worked together in organized chaos. The old council chamber had been torn down. In its place stood the Stellar Assembly, a building made of glass and light that seemed to float in space. Every species in the galaxy could see inside it. No more secret meetings, no more hidden decisions. Harin stood at the center of it all, no longer the military advisor of a dead friend. She was now the first speaker of the Stellar Assembly, elected by representatives from over 300 species. Her hair was slightly grayer than it had been a year ago, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that had brought down an empire. The vote is complete, she announced to the packed chamber. Her voice carried to every corner of the galaxy, through quantum communication networks that humans had built in the past year. The Reconstruction Act passes. Every species that was kept down by the old council will receive the technology and resources they need to build their own futures. Cheers erupted from hundreds of different types of throats. Some roared, some whistled, some made sounds like crystal bells ringing. But they all meant the same thing. Hope. In the military section of the assembly, Commander Quan watched with satisfaction. His hair was completely gray now, but he still looked like he could fight a war single-handed if needed. The uniform he wore was different. Instead of human military colors, it showed the symbol of the Stellar Defense Force. Humans, Vorthak, Thekanari, and dozens of other species working together to protect the new galaxy. Hard to believe, said the being sitting next to him. It was General Vexithara, the former Vorthak commander who had once planned to destroy human colonies. Now he served as Quan's deputy, his metal skull implants decorated with flowers that human children had given him. What's hard to believe? Quan asked. That we're friends now, Vexithara said, his grinding voice somehow gentle. A year ago I would have killed you without a second thought. Now I would die to protect your grandchildren. Quan smiled. That's what happens when you stop trying to be enemies and start trying to understand each other. It had not been easy. The first months after the Council's surrender had been chaos. Some species tried to take revenge on their former oppressors. Others tried to grab power for themselves. A few tried to bring back the old ways, but humanity had been ready for that too. Rex spoke from the engineering section, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had literally rebuilt worlds. The Corvash system is complete, he announced. Full terraforming finished ahead of schedule. They now have 3 garden worlds instead of 1 poisoned rock. The Corvash delegate, a crystalline being who sparkled like a rainbow, sang a note of pure joy. Under the old council, her people had been forced to live on a dying world, their resources stripped away to feed the empire. Now they had more space, and wealth than they had ever dreamed of. Rex had found his calling in the new galaxy. Instead of tearing apart asteroids for rare metals, he built worlds from nothing. His teams had created dozens of new habitable planets in the past year, using technology that combined human engineering with alien sciences. The beautiful thing about destruction, Rex often said, is that you learn exactly how things are put together. Makes it easy to build them better the next time. In the intelligence section, Jake Morrison worked quietly at a console that connected him to agents across the galaxy. But these weren't spies anymore. They were teachers, healers, and bridge builders. Jake had discovered that the same skills that made him good at uncovering secrets also made him excellent at helping different species understand each other. The Yithmaran integration is going smoothly, he reported. Turns out they're natural diplomats once you get past the communication barriers. Who knew that species who talk in colors could be so good at explaining complex ideas? Jake's greatest success had been the Truth and Reconciliation program. Instead of putting former council leaders on trial, humans had convinced the galaxy to focus on understanding how the old system had gone wrong and how to prevent it from happening again. Former enemies worked together to document their shared history. They studied their mistakes. They built monuments to the species that had been quietly erased by the Council over the centuries. Most importantly, they made sure everyone knew the full truth about how the galaxy had really worked for 3,000 years. Haran walked to the great window that looked out into space. The view was spectacular. Instead of the empty darkness that had surrounded Nexus Prime for millennia, space around the station buzzed with activity. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went constantly. Not warships, but cargo vessels, passenger transports, research, ships, and explorer craft. The galaxy was alive with trade, discovery, and friendship in ways it had never been before. But the most impressive sight was the memorial fleet. 50 human ships hung motionless in space near the station. They were the most advanced vessels ever built, capable of unimaginable destruction. But their weapons had been permanently disabled. Instead of guns, they carried museums, libraries, and archives. Each ship was dedicated to a species that had been destroyed by the Council over the centuries. The names of the lost were written on their hulls in letters of light that could be seen from thousands of kilometers away. At the center of the memorial fleet hung the Jin-Ha, the largest ship humanity had ever built. It was not a weapon of war, but a university, where beings from across the galaxy came to learn about democracy, evolution, and the courage to change. "It's beautiful," said a voice behind Haran. She turned to see Counselor Zeth Kara approaching. The former council leader looked older and smaller than he had a year ago, but there was something new in his 4 eyes. Peace, maybe, or wisdom. "Never thought I would say this to a human," he continued. "But I am glad you won." Haran studied his face. "Why?" "Because you were right," Zethkara said simply. "We had stopped growing. We had stopped learning. We had become so afraid of losing what we had that we forgot why we had it in the first place." He gestured at the busy space outside the window. "Look at this. In 1 year, you've done more to advance galactic civilization than we did in 3,000 years. New technologies, new worlds, new friendships between species that had been enemies for centuries. We couldn't have done it without your help," Haran said. "All of you. Former council species have been our greatest allies in building this new galaxy." It was true. Once they got over their initial shock and fear, most of the elder races had embraced the changes with enthusiasm. After millennia of stagnation, they were finally growing again, learning again, becoming more than they had been. "What happens now?" Zeth Kara asked. Haran smiled and pointed to a section of space where new construction was taking place. Massive ring-shaped structures were being built around stars, turning raw solar energy into power for entire civilizations. "Now we keep building," she said. "We've got a whole galaxy to explore, new species to meet, new problems to solve, new dreams to make real. And if some species don't want to join the new order, then they're free to go their own way," Haran said. "The difference between us and the old council is that we actually mean it when we say people have the right to choose." She looked back at the memorial fleet, thinking of Jinha's last words. "My friend died believing we could do better," she said quietly. "Every day we prove he was right." Across the galaxy, the changes continued. On former Council worlds, children who had never been allowed to dream were building impossible things. In the deep space between stars, explorers were finding wonders that had been hidden for millions of years. On the edge of known space, first contact teams were meeting new species and offering them something the galaxy had never given before: a real choice about their future. Humanity had done more than win a war. They had changed what it meant to be alive in the universe. The memorial to Jinha on New Sol had grown into something magnificent. It was no longer just a simple stone marker. It had become a garden that stretched for kilometers, filled with plants from every world in the stellar assembly. Children from hundreds of species played there together, speaking in languages their grandparents could never have imagined. At the center of the garden stood a statue of Jinha giving his final speech to the council. The inscription beneath it was simple, written in every language known to galactic civilization. He died believing we could do better. We did. But the real memorial wasn't the statue or the garden. It was the galaxy itself, a place where species evolved together instead of conquering each other, where wisdom was earned through growth, not age, where the impossible happened every day because people refused to accept that it couldn't be done. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that the future belonged to those brave enough to build it. And they were just getting started. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, as if the universe approved of what its children had finally learned to do. In the vast darkness between worlds, new ships were already setting course for unknown galaxies, carrying the dream that Jinha had died for. The dream that everyone, everywhere, deserved the chance to become something more than they were.